Never go to the second location. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. And you know, on Residue, we tell the truth behind your favorite movies. Today, we will be talking about Jennifer's Body, starring Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried. This movie is very loosely based on the murder of 15-year-old Elyse Pahler. Before we get started, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, TikTok at Residue, a True Crime Podcast, and Facebook, Residue, a True Crime Podcast. And, of course, the greatest thing you can possibly do for any podcast that you love is leave a positive review. Again, thank you so much, Resi Crew, for coming through and letting me know that you are really digging the show. Thank you guys so much. And before we get started, remember that listener discretion is always advised. Jennifer's Body is a 2009 American comedy horror movie directed by Karen Kusama and written by Diablo Cody. It stars Megan Fox as Jennifer Check and Amanda Seyfried as her best friend Anita Needy Lesnicki. The film follows Jennifer after she becomes a demonically possessed high school student who begins killing and eating her male classmates, while her best friend Needy must figure out how to stop her. And the story is framed through Needy's perspective as an adult in a mental facility, looking back on the events that led to Jennifer's transformation. Growing up in Devil's Kettle, Minnesota, Needy and Jennifer are unlikely best friends. Jennifer is the popular, beautiful cheerleader, while Needy is bookish and insecure. And after surviving a fire at a local club where an indie rock band called Low Shoulder is performing, Jennifer leaves with the band. Later, she returns, strange, covered in blood, and soon begins a killing spree where she seduces and devours the boys at school. And as Needy uncovers the truth, she discovers Jennifer was offered as a satanic sacrifice to the band in exchange for fame. But the ritual went wrong and left her a flesh-eating succubus. Now, Diablo Cody and the filmmakers intended the movie to go beyond simple horror. She wrote it to explore female empowerment and the intensity of adolescent female friendships, deliberately subverting traditional horror tropes where women are passive victims. The opening statement, "Hell is a Teenage Girl," reflects themes of puberty, female rage, and the pressures of fitting into culturally prescribed roles. So when Jennifer's Body was first released, it underperformed at the box office. It received mixed reviews. The critics said that the balance between horror and comedy was uneven, even though performances and dialogue were praised. It grossed about $31.6 million and had a $16 million budget. But over time, the film has been reappraised by audiences and critics as a cult classic with feminist subtext, and even stars like Amanda Seyfried have said that the marketing of this movie, it misrepresented the movie. It emphasized Megan Fox's sex appeal over the story's themes. If you haven't seen Jennifer's Body, or if you haven't seen it in a long time, you must go rewatch this film. It is such a badass film that was just so underappreciated. While Jennifer's Body is a work of fiction, its core idea, a teenage girl being sacrificed as part of a band's occult-tinged ritual, bears a very loose resemblance to the real 1995 murder of 15-year-old Elyse Pahler. Constance Grady reported that a new critical consensus was forming that appreciated this film as a, quote, forgotten feminist classic. She stated that the film's story of a group of powerful men sacrificing a girl's body on the altar of their own professional advancement became uncomfortably familiar. And this, according to Constance Grady, allowed viewers to see this film rather than as a sex fantasy, but as a revenge fantasy as Jennifer uses her abused body against her attackers. The oldest of 4 children, Elyse Marie Pahler, was born on April 24th, 1980. Elyse was an athlete, a great student. She was extremely friendly to everyone she met, and she didn't have a ton of friends, but she had close friends, and that's what I always say, quality over quantity. She was your typical teenage girl. She loved sleepovers, dance parties with her best friends, talking about boys. She had a tight-knit friend group. But Elyse had a little bit of a rebellious side, nothing major, just like smoking some marijuana, sneaking around with boys. She was the all-American girl and a sweetheart to her friends. Elyse was also in love with musician Beck. You know the typical teenage girl room, especially in the 80s and 90s? Her walls were just covered with posters of Beck Hansen. She was fascinated with Beck's childhood and growing up in L.A. Her favorite album by Beck was One Foot in the Grave. Elyse also adored somebody else, her eccentric, strong-willed grandmother, Elyse Walter. Obviously, they share the same name. She was named after her grandmother, and she loved spending time at her grandmother's ranch riding her horses. Elyse found life in Aurora Grande, California, very boring and lackluster. She would tell her friends that one day she'd take off to LA and, quote, make it big. I very quickly wanted to mention that my 2 main sources for today's episode are the book In the Name of Satan by Wensley Clarkson and also the docuseries A Killer Among Friends. According to Elyse's friends, her very best friends, she was the rebel of the friend group, but she wasn't extreme. She wasn't a bad kid. She just had a little bit of a rebellious side. She was bored in this town, and she wanted to explore new things. She liked smoking some marijuana, and one day her family finds her stash of marijuana in her bedroom, and her parents do not take this very lightly at all. I mean, it's the 90s. She's only like 15 years old at this time. So her parents have her attend classes at the Mariposa Community Recovery Center. Now, a family friend stated that Elyse's use of cannabis was about the only contradiction to her character. It was a weakness, but then again, she was hardly the only bored kid in Arroyo Grande. It is in these recovery classes where Elyse meets a boy her age named Jacob DeLachemont. So these two never really bonded during these meetings, but Jacob sure had his eye on Elyse. Jacob was the same age as Elyse, went to the same high school. He was 15 years old, and he was described as grungy. A lot of the girls had a crush on him. He was actually a fantastic artist, but he was known as a kid around town that had a bit of a drug problem, hence why he was in the recovery classes with Elyse. And now Jacob had 3 best friends. Joe Fiorella, he was 14. There was Royce Casey, who was 16, and Travis Williamson, 17. Oh, and these boys were otherwise known as Hatred. Yep, they were in a death metal band, these 4 BFFs, and that death metal band was named Hatred, and they were modeled after Slayer. And some of their favorite Slayer lyrics were, "Slice her flesh to shreds, watch the blood flow free." So, Joe Fiorella, he was kind of creepy. Now, Joe's the youngest of the group, and he had this reputation around town for just creeping all the girls out. It's the 90s. It's the grunge era. Believe me, I know all about the 90s. So the girls say that Jacob dressed grungy, skaterish, and that it was really hot and they thought he was really cute, but that Joe was just more like grimy, but thought he was grungy, and he just wanted to be Jacob so bad. So Joe is the drummer of Hatred, and he had greasy hair, dirty clothes, and his favorite movie was River's Edge with Keanu Reeves, which, by the way, River's Edge is also loosely based on a true crime, but we will explore that in a different episode. So, River's Edge. This dude would quote River's Edge to no end. Let me read you some quotes. I get in a fight, I go fucking crazy. Everything goes black and I fucking explode like it's the end of the world. Who cares if this guy wastes me because I'm going to waste him first. So these friends, these boys would all sit around Hatred. Let's call them Hatred. They would all sit around all day, smoke weed, watch River's Edge. I mean, sounds like a fantastic time to me. In the 90s, all we did was sit around and watch Heathers all day, me and my friends. We quote that stuff to this day. I can sit there with you and watch the movies Heathers and annoy the hell out of you because I'm going to say every single word from that movie. But was I writing fake suicide notes for my friends? No. These guys just couldn't differentiate reality from fiction. And this was their most favorite quote from River's Edge. Now, in this part of the movie, River's Edge, there was this teacher who discovered that most of his classroom had been shielding a murderer. So the teacher says, no one in this class gives a damn that she's dead. It gives us a chance to feel superior and point out the fundamental moral breakdown in society, but it doesn't really affect us, does it? Because if it did, none of us would be in this classroom right now. We'd be on the streets, half crazy from a lack of sleep, hunting down the killer with a gun. Another huge aspect as to why they loved this movie, especially Joe, was that they featured Slayer in this soundtrack. There were a couple of tracks by Slayer, actually. Tormentor, Evil Has No Boundaries, and Die by the Sword. 16-year-old Royce Casey, another member of Hatred and this best friend group, he was the quiet guy of the group, and Royce was even known to occasionally have a girlfriend. So the other guys are just, creeping girls out a little bit. Royce actually had some relationships. Author Wensley Clarkson describes Royce as the quiet man of the group, and he also looked altogether more civilized than the others. And then we have 17-year-old Travis Williamson, and there isn't much to know about Travis other than the fact that he was the guy that drove all the other boys around, and he also lived with Joe and his mother for a while. And the reason we don't know a lot about Travis is because Travis parts ways with these boys at a certain point, and he is not actually involved in the murder of Elyse Pahler. But, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Hatred. So these boys, they wrote their own songs, and they actually gathered together a few $100s so that they could record one of their songs. And they made about 200 copies, and the plan was that they were going to sell these copies to their fans. And apparently most of their lyrics were about sacrificing virgins and worshiping the devil. So 14-year-old Joe and 15-year-old Jacob, they actually rode Elyse's school bus. And Elyse's mother, Elyse Pahler, she said that Joe kind of creeped her out, that she noticed that Joe would ride his bike back and forth in front of their house. And one day he just knocked on their door and said, "Hi, my black cat is missing. Have you seen it?" And she didn't see it, but she said the moment that boy started speaking and he was on her front doorstep that she just got the creeps all through her body. There was something so off about that child. And Elyse never really spoke to them, but she had these weird encounters with them. There was one time she was walking home from her bus stop and she saw the 4 boys and they're yelling at her and they're like, "You have to help us. Come here, please help. Somebody fell in this ditch." She's like, "What are you talking about?" So she goes down towards them and she's standing on the edge of this ditch. And one of the boys just pushes her into the ditch. And her mother sees this happen. So her mother starts yelling, like, what are you doing, Elyse? Are you okay? And she goes over there. Elyse gets out of the ditch and she tells her mom, oh, don't worry about it. They're just stupid boys. They don't mean anything by it. But she did later confide to her friend Angel that it felt weird, that she really didn't understand what they were up to, and it made her feel really weird. In another instance, Elyse is walking home again from the bus stop with her friend Angel, and the boys are walking towards them, and the boys keep trying to talk to them. And I believe it's Jacob is talking to Angel, and he's asking, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing later? Do you guys want to hang out? And Angel's like, no, we don't. But they look at Elyse and they're like, well, what about you? And it just gave them such a creepy feeling. And Angel said to Elyse, come on, let's go. What are you doing? These guys are creepy. So that is why it amazed Angel, Elyse's best friend, that she's speaking to Elyse one night on the phone, and Elyse informs her that she attended a party the previous night. And at that party, the 4 boys of hatred were in attendance. And they just sat with Elyse, they smoked a little with her, and she had a really great conversation with all of them. So she calls her friend and she's like, listen, Angel, I think that you've got them pegged all wrong. They're really cool dudes. And Angel was like, girl, no, they are not. Elyse is telling Angel, listen, they're not so bad. We just might have gotten it wrong. And Angel's going, will you please be careful around them? They're creeps and you better watch out for them. But Elyse said, I kind of like Jacob. And that's when Angel breaks into, no. You are absolutely kidding me. You cannot like Jacob. And Elyse says, but I think he's kind of cute, you know? I mean, we've all had this conversation with one of our friends who gets a crush on the red flag person. And Angel keeps going, dude, you've got to listen to me. This kid is a weirdo. But this is when Elyse informs her best friend, I gave them my phone number. She gave Joe and Jacob her phone number. I know. And listen, not even have all of us had a conversation with our friend about the weirdo that she has a crush on, but we've had crushes on the red flag weirdo. I mean, more times than I would like to admit. She also tells Angel before they hang up the phone, I really, really do think that Jacob's cute, and I think that I might hang out with him later tonight. July 21st, 1995. It's a Friday night and Elyse Pahler is watching TV with her entire family in the family room. The telephone rings. Elyse gets up and answers it, and her mother says that it's a very quick phone call. There's not a lot being said. Elyse is just saying yes, no, okay, and then she hangs up. And then about 10 minutes later, another phone call comes in. And this one is only about 10 seconds long. And Elyse barely spoke on this conversation. Her mother heard her say, uh-huh. Then she hung up the phone. And then she said to her family, I'm going to go to bed. I love you. Good night. And then Elyse went up to her bedroom and she stuffed some pillows inside of her blankets to make it look like she was asleep. And she snuck out her French doors in her bedroom. The very next morning, Saturday, July 22nd, 1995, Elyse Pahler's mother, Lizanne, woke suddenly with an intense feeling of dread. And she just said, where's Elyse? And she couldn't find her. She went into her bedroom. She wasn't there. She sent her sisters into the bedroom. There's no Elyse. Nobody knows where Elyse is. So they call the police, and the police tell them, well, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait 24 hours. This is a 15-year-old girl, and the police are treating it as if she's a runaway. But her family knows. Her father is saying, this is different from a runaway case. Our daughter is missing, and you need to get out there and do your job and find my daughter. If there's one thing you're going to find out about Elyse's parents is they're badasses. They do not give up, and they do not take no for an answer. David and Elyse Pahler, Elyse's parents, they wait 24 hours. It's now July 23rd, 1995. They call the police again. Her father tells police before she went missing, they were all watching TV together as a family and the phone rang. They tell the whole story over again. Now, this community is so small that when a 15-year-old girl goes missing, the town is talking. The town is horrified. Her parents get out there. They blast this to the media. They're out there handing out flyers. They're talking to all of her friends. 2 to 3 weeks goes by and nobody knows where Elyse is. Now, the kids in this town are put on lockdown. They're not allowed to go anywhere. People are scared. Like, this felt completely surreal. By August 1995, Elyse has been missing for 3 weeks, and police just acted like she was a teenage runaway. Nobody was taking this seriously, and Elyse's family keeps saying over and over, this isn't our daughter. At this point, so many reports are coming out of people seeing Elyse, and someone said they saw her in LA auditioning for an acting role because she wanted to be an actress. So could this be true? Did Elyse really run away from home? People said that they saw her at the circus, that she literally ran away and joined the circus. And someone else called and said that they saw Elyse living in a mobile home with an older man doing meth. Somebody else called and said, I saw her walking on the beach. Yep, she's just at the beach. Go look for her. Elyse's parents, they wouldn't stop at trying to find her. They wanted to keep her name in the media. And of course, her parents are let down. Every single time somebody calls in a tip, they say that they saw her. Of course, the police check on every single one of these tips, and every single time her parents are let down. They said that they didn't want to think the negative. They wanted to always be hopeful that she will come home. So of course, they were hopeful when they heard these tips. They also heard crazy tips like, Elyse is going to call you on Christmas Eve. She's ready to call you. She's ready to talk to you. Christmas Eve comes and goes. And of course, there is no phone call. Can you imagine how devastating that was for this family? What kind of people do this? Like, what kind of sick people call in a tip like that or call in to give the family some hope? We've heard it so many times in these cases. By January 1996, Elyse's grandmother felt just so overwhelmed that she actually decided to write her own open letter to her granddaughter in the local newspaper. And that letter read, I miss you and I love you. Everyone is very worried and heartbroken because we don't know where you are. We don't know how you are, if you are happy, warm, well-fed, and healthy. I promise you, I do not want to drag you home or anything even like that. I just want us to sit down and talk and hug. Please, please, just call me so we can know you are alive. My love always, Nana. Now, obviously, at this point, school already started back up in the fall. It's now January 1996. These kids are going on about their lives like nothing happened, and it made them feel incredibly depressed, especially the kids closest to Elyse, her closest friends. They were like, we're just going on about our lives like nothing happened, and we don't know where our friend is. And Elyse's father, David, is still hanging up signs and posters all over the school. At all times, these posters are being taken back down. They're being ripped off the walls. And David gets a call telling him, you better stop putting up these posters. First of all, why? She attended your high school. He should be putting up posters. But someone from that school thought this was a really bad idea. They wanted the kids to move on with their lives. And David was like, no, I will keep putting up these posters, and if you want to keep tearing them down, that's your business, but I'm going to be right back there at that school hanging them back up again. It is also at this time in January 1996 that Royce Casey starts getting really close to Elyse's best friend, Angel. And she's starting to like Royce, that he's really quiet, he's really kind. But at home, Royce's parents start noticing that he is not himself. He seems very depressed, withdrawn. He's always in his room, writing in his journal a lot. And they start taking Royce to church with them. Royce began attending the New Life Ministry in nearby Pismo Beach. He was a regular there, constantly attending sermons. Royce starts talking privately to one of the ministers on a regular basis, and one time he asks him, "Do you think that a person is basically damned forever?" And the priest is like, "What are you talking about?" And Royce says, "Can God forgive anything?" And this minister says, "Yes, God can forgive everything, my son." And this gets Royce a little excited about the fact that, okay, I'm not going to be damned forever because God will forgive me. The minister asks, "Well, what do you need to be forgiven for, son?" And Royce Casey starts slowly telling this minister everything that happened to Elyse Pahler the night she went missing. On March 13th, 1996, Royce Casey confesses. Royce said there was no way that he could continue down this tortured path. His entire life was different. He was not seeing his friends anymore. He was failing all of his classes. He was basically about to be a high school dropout because this dark secret that he was holding on to was ruining his life. Royce Casey walked in to the Arroyo Grande police station and made a full confession to his part in killing Elyse Pahler. And after he made this confession, he led investigators to where Elise's body was. Elise's body was found in San Luis Obispo County, and with this full confession and Elise's body, detectives went to arrest Joe Fiorella and Jacob DeLashmutt. Police arrested Joe, and they asked his mom to come along. Down to the station, they get Joe and his mom into the police car, and detectives say that Joe wouldn't stop talking and asking questions, like he was trying to figure out how much they knew and how much he should say. Meanwhile, Jacob is also arrested, but he rides alone in his police car, and he doesn't say a word. Detectives do say that Royce Casey wanted to talk. He was relieved to be getting all of this off of his chest. It was a very stark contrast to the way that Joe and Jacob were behaving in their interrogations. For 5 hours, Royce told police what happened to Elyse on that night. He said that they did call her and they invited her to sneak out of her house and come down to the eucalyptus field so that they could smoke some marijuana together. She said she would sneak out of her bedroom doors and the boys waited for her at the top of her driveway. That is when they walked her to the field. They walked down to this eucalyptus grove. They smoked marijuana. One of the boys said they, quote, filled Elyse with drugs. And the foursome is walking. Suddenly, Elyse falls to the ground and her eyes are drooping from the effects of the drugs that she just had a few minutes earlier. And these boys are kind of kneeling down next to her. They still have their flashlights on. And Elyse is on her knees and she's peering up, kind of squinting towards this light, and she starts crying. The boys are now standing above her as she's on the ground, and one of them pulls her hair and they pull her deeper into the bushes. They're not even talking to each other or to her. She has no idea what's going on. And shortly after they arrive at the spot that they had chosen, Jacob takes his belt off and starts to strangle Elyse. And while he's strangling Elyse, he's looking over at Joe. And Joe takes out a knife and stabs Elyse in the neck with this hunting knife. Elyse is screaming and crying. She's fighting back as hard as she can. She is crying for her mother. And one of these boys puts his hand over her mouth, and then they take turns trading that knife back and forth, and they stab Elyse 12 more times. She is still crying for her mother. She is praying to God. And these boys, they are stomping on her neck. And then they drag her a little farther in to the bushes and they leave her there. And she bleeds to death. None of those stab wounds were fatal. Elyse had to lay there alone and bleed to death. And this just gets even worse. So these boys decided that once she was actually deceased, once she had passed, they discussed raping her corpse. Now, court documents do state that Royce Casey said no, they should leave, and that they buried her in a shallow grave and left the area. And why did they do this? Well, Royce Casey says it's because they sold their soul to the devil. They had to kill 666 blue-eyed virgins as a sacrifice to Satan in order to earn a ticket to hell. They were sacrificing virgins because if they did this, if they performed this ritual, then their band would get really big. Their band would become the most famous band in all of the land, and they would be the greatest guitar players to ever exist. And how did they figure this out? Well, they say Slayer lyrics and chat rooms. These 3 teenage boys picked Elyse because she, quote, had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she was a virgin. She would be the perfect sacrifice to the devil. And when they were asked why would you do this? They said by making this perfect sacrifice to the devil, they would gain more craziness or nuts. That would make them play harder, play faster. And by making this perfect sacrifice to the devil, it would help them go, quote, professional. These teenagers were so serious about this that they even joined a satanic cult online. They paid $100 to get a membership card that proved that, yes, they worship the devil. And not only that, but they really did think they were going to kill 666 girls. They even had their next victim picked out. And they actually took Elyse to a specific spot in the woods. Now, there was a spot where these 3 trees had fallen, and they formed some kind of pentagram or something that resembled a pentagram. So these boys built an actual altar there at this spot, and they planned to sacrifice there. And this is where they took Elyse that night. 1997, this is 2 years after Elyse was murdered, and the case never goes to trial. All 3 of these boys pled no contest, and Elyse's parents were pissed off. They weren't even informed that this was going to happen. They wanted a trial. They wanted closure. They wanted to know what those boys did in those woods, and they wanted to hear it from their mouth. And they're notified that the boys took a plea deal. There's no trial. They all got life sentences with the possibility of parole. After their daughter's murder, Elyse's parents, David and Lizanne, filed a civil lawsuit against the heavy metal band Slayer and their record label, American Recordings, a Sony imprint. They claimed that Slayer's lyrics and marketing influenced the 3 attackers and helped incite the murder. And the band and label violated California law by distributing and marketing harmful and obscene material to minors. The Pahlers' complaint specifically cited songs like Postmortem and Dead Skin Mask, alleging these lyrics offered step-by-step instructions relevant to stalking, killing, and even necrophilia. Their strategy leaned on California's Business and Professions Code, arguing that if violent material is knowingly marketed to minors, the distributors can be held liable. These lawsuits did not succeed. So in the first lawsuit, a California judge ruled that Slayer's music was protected speech under the First Amendment, and it's not legally obscene, indecent, or harmful simply because it contained violent lyrics. And the judge said that there was no legal basis for blaming the band's music for the boys' actions. So the Pahlers file a second lawsuit, and this lawsuit also failed because there was no duty or foreseeability that this music would lead to murder. So the case against Slayer is rooted in this belief that violent, satanic-themed music contributed to this real-life violent behavior. And this claim has come up in many entertainment lawsuits over the years. But the U.S. courts consistently hold that lyrics and artistic expression are protected under the First Amendment. And in this instance, the judge specifically said that Slayer's music while it's offensive to some, it didn't constitute legally actionable harm. Now, Jacob, while in prison, he gave an interview to the Washington Post, and he said, "The music is destructive, but that's not why Elyse was murdered. She was murdered because Joe Fiorella was obsessed with her and obsessed with killing her." These boys, they consistently came up for parole. And in March of 2025, Elyse's parents had to attend another parole hearing for Royce Casey. Now, this was hearing number 11. This was 30 years later, after their daughter's murder, and her dad is still going to parole hearings. And he says, there isn't any closure in this matter. She is gone. He should not get out. I'm Elyse's protector, and I wasn't able to protect her that night. And he stated that he was going to walk into that parole board hearing, look Royce Casey straight in the face, say he should never be allowed to get out, and look at him and say goodbye and good luck. But that didn't happen, because Royce Casey was released in August of 2025, and Jacob DeLachement was also released in July of 2025. Joe Fiorella remains in prison. Royce Casey acknowledged that he could have stopped the crime before or during the assault, but he did not. This is according to a courthousenews.com article right after his parole release. He stated, "The knowledge that she was dying must have been horrifying, and she must have been in immense spiritual turmoil and pain, not having any proof of what comes after this life." Also, according to this same article, the survivors of Elyse's murder, their lives were forever changed by the actions of these three boys. Both of Elyse's parents have struggled with mental health issues for 3 decades. And in a 2017 court filing for restitution, David Pahler, a once successful contractor, described how the couple lost their home and had to rely on food stamps because they could no longer go to work. Elyse's mother, Lizanne, stated that she loved us. She always had a big smile. She wasn't an in-your-face type of kid. She had this great, uplifting personality, said her father, David. She had big hopes and dreams. She wanted to be an actress, a singer in a band, an artist, and someday a mother. And David Pahler reflects, saying that she wanted to be famous. She wanted everyone in this country to eventually know her name. Stay safe and stay paranoid. Residue is created, hosted, researched, written, edited, and produced by me, Chrissy Champagne.